Hello everyone, this is Jim Ograsinski with your weekly lecture video. I believe this is week 10. So we begin our work on chapter 3. Many of you have already completed your discussion board activity for exercise 3.2. This particular chapter is all about writing in the middle, and we'll get to the PowerPoint, or I should say slide presentation, in a little bit. In this particular unit or module, we have the next discussion board next week. Discussion board 13 is the note takers triad. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the rest of the lecture video. Just to give you a heads up, the assessment for this particular module is the double entry journal. So that can be found on pages 97 to 103 in the Curious Researcher. As part of this activity, I urge you all to read that section. Just like the note takers triad, I believe that it is just beneficial for you to get some background information before you write the activity. And I'll cover that a little bit more in this week's screencast video. So let me get to our chapter 3 section here. All right, so writing in the middle is a critical skill, and it really does take place in the middle of the research process, where Ballinger talks about how we converse with a source. Finding a source is really important. That'll help support your topic, but what we do with sources is just as critically important in the research and writing process. Okay? Because as you're reading and as you're thinking about your source, you're having that conversation in your head. It's a knowledge generating activity. We write to make meaning, and that's what research and writing is all about. So it's a genuine conversation between you and your source. So in here, I say don't don't write to record things. Write to make meaning and to follow our own words about a subject to see what you have to say about it. So when you're looking for paraphrases or you're looking for quotes or passages in your research, in your sources to help you with your research essay and what you're looking to learn from your sources about your topic, you want to make sure that you actually interact with it. Just don't record. Don't look at a quote and say, hey, this is a really good quote. I'm going to use this. Do some thinking and writing around it. Start yourself up a Google Doc, copy and paste some quotes or passages, and then write your thinking about those so that way you can become a little bit more of an owner of that information and knowledge. And one of the things that we really look at here in writing with the middle and working with the words of others is how do we avoid plagiarism? How do we work with sources? Right? So we want to talk about attributions. They're tags that marks the speaker when we use them, their words in writing. Quotation marks, obviously, we use to cite a quote in text, and then also the works cited page, because we do have to avoid plagiarism and we have to give credit for the ideas of others. It's a critical activity here, right? So you can go through the plagiarism Q&A on page 86. All right. It's important to understand what plagiarism is. Why does it matter? This is really intellectual property when you look at and review an article, a scholarly journal, or any of those pieces of information, even a YouTube video or a TED Talk. They have their own ideas that they've developed, their arguments, and you want to make sure you give them credit for their thinking, whether it's an author or a presenter. So just to kind of refresh everybody's memory what plagiarism might be, using someone else's work and claiming it as your own is also plagiarism. Handing in the same paper in two different classes, not citing your sources properly, that is critical. Sometimes students might inadvertently plagiarize by usually appropriating too much of the language of a source and including that in their particular research essays, okay? Yes, not indicating that a language is taken by using quotes when needed, and then rewriting a passage from a source but slightly changing it and not citing it. That is really plagiarism there. Common knowledge is if you run across ideas in like 4 or more sources, that would be considered common knowledge because it's across the spectrum of research and writing. So the note taker's triad is really straightforward, right? So generally we want to do two things when finding a relevant source. Whether it's exploratory, try to explain what the source says to you and what it is you find significant about it. Exploratory writing tells the writer the story of his thinking and then a way to find ideas and questions that build your draft. Understand the source, use paraphrases and quotations, and this is what's implemented into your research essay. So this is the triad here, and it's really paraphrasing, and paraphrasing sometimes is much harder than actually using quotes, because then you have to rewrite the passage in your own words, and you have to stay away from the structure of that particular passage, right? You have to keep it about the same length, pay attention to how you interpret the passage and the author's meaning. You got to find your own way of saying that, and sometimes paraphrasing is really a difficult task. You have to put a little effort in paraphrasing. Summary is really a reduction of longer material into a brief statement or two that captures the idea, argument, or theme, right? Summarizing involves boiling down a passage, not the entire work, but down to its basic ideas. Most summaries are not going to be objective, but they should be fair to the source if it's done well. So it's usually where you take this large passage in a source, you don't know what to use as a quote. It's really too large to paraphrase, so you might have to break it down to a summary, and you can include that into a paragraph providing the context, right? And quoting is really important because everybody has a tendency to lean on quotes, but it is a way to bring an expert into your topic. Like the language and the words of that particular author are just too important to ignore, so you want to use the exact words. Usually this is great when you're working with a literary text, a transcript, and quoted material are essential to the writing. So you want to quote selectively, provide a context around your quote, a lead in before, so you build up some of the context, the quote, and then the follow-up after it is where you really attach the relevance, you explain it, you analyze it, you interpret it, and that way it makes sense to the audience. So you want to make sure that when you quote, you have to build what we call that sandwich around it, top and bottom and the quote in the middle, all right? Like I mentioned, I will discuss in detail the double entry journal on the Monday screencast video. So if you have any questions about chapter 3 and the triad here, please give me, well, I should say you can just send me an email, all right? Thank you and be safe.